Ladies and gentlemen, we all know that scaling food tech requires overcoming quite a number of barriers, to put it mildly. So the big question always, inevitably, is how could and should governments help in that effort? Joining us for this insightful discussion, we will have today Jurgen Sonneborn, Senior Advisor for Indirect Investment Food at Oost NL. We have Maria Asano, Partner at the European Circular Bioeconomy Fund. We have Dr. Roger Wyse, or Wyse, I hope I haven't mispronounced it terribly, venture capitalist, founder and managing partner at Spruce Capital Partners. And here to chair the discussion, please welcome Isabella Iglesias-Musachio, CEO, founder at Bosque Foods. Hello, hello. Welcome. It's all yours. Don't be too shy.
Hey everybody, how's it going? I'm very excited for this discussion today. I'll wait for the music to go. Why don't we start by just everybody introducing themselves and telling the audience a little bit about what you're doing, what you're working on, okay? Roger, you want to kick it off?
Yeah, I'll start. Roger Wyse, I'm a founding partner at Spruce Capital. We've been investing in the agri-food space for 23 years now. So it's interesting now to see all the trends and hear the new discussion about the opportunities. It's probably, I'm getting too old to be excited about it, but I really am. The other is that I serve on the board of the Bioinnovation Organization, which is a Washington-based trade organization for the biotech industry, and so we're very active in policy development in Washington.
So hi, my name is Marie. I'm a partner at ECBF. We're a 300 million euro private venture capital fund. We invest across ag, food, industrial biotech, and packaging. So I represent, I guess, also together with Roger, sort of the private side. However, in my previous job, I used to work for a half public, half private fund called HDGF, or High Tech Gründerfonds in Germany. So I want to bring that perspective also to the discussion.
My name is Jurgen Sonneborn. I work for Oost NL. We are a regional development agency in the Netherlands. We represent a region called Food Valley, the Wageningen area. Oost NL, as a regional development agency, we invest in early stage companies. We stimulate innovation, and we work on trade and investment promotion.
Great, thanks everybody. And my name is Isabella. I'm the CEO and founder of Bosque Foods. We're a biomass fermentation company. We produce mycelium and next generation meat and fish alternatives. US-German company, so a little bit about me. Today we're talking about scaling food tech. I want to open up food tech to not only plant-based, but I want this to be, be very open about it. This can be cultivated meat. This can be fermentation-enabled platforms, but really, the types of food solutions that are going to bring us into the future of food. We all know that there's enormous challenges for scaling these, whether it comes to infrastructure, regulatory, marketing, and education, you name it, just to name a few. And so we want to ask ourselves today, what are those challenges and what role should the government or different government organizations be playing in helping to actually bridge those gaps and help to scale these technologies? So let's start off by asking ourselves, what are the key barriers for actually scaling food tech, the food tech industry, and how have they traditionally been addressed by the industry, whether private companies, startups, etc.? This can be for anybody on the panel.
Well, listening to the last panel, you heard a lot about cell-based products, cell-based meats. You heard a lot about fermentation. So in the US, we have a government initiative now on driving the bioeconomy, and the biggest investment needed is in fermentation capacity. And that's not a simple thing because it's not just capacity. You can have the fermenter, but you have to have the downstream processing as well. So it's a major capital investment. And then related to that is workforce development. Who's going to run that facility and who's going to be there to help the startup companies both to scale, but to develop those downstream processing capabilities. So massive capital investment where governments can provide low-interest loans or other incentives or build facilities, and you'll see those around the world. But to me, fermentation is an important part, and CapEx is going to be a big part of it.
So I'd like to add on to what Roger said, and in order for that capex to happen, because a lot of these companies are really capital intensive, I think a large barrier, at least that we sort of see as venture capitalists, is you have a company, and they had to raise massive rounds actually to make up for capex needs. But in terms of commercial development and market entry, they're actually quite immature, just because it's such a capital-intensive business. So I think, and what that leads to is basically very large rounds that are happening, and venture capitalists that are saying, we have to pay a lot for the pre-money valuation just because the company's raised a lot. But in terms of traction, both commercial and technological, it's not really there to justify such a high price. So I would really say, non-dilutive funding, whether that's grants, regional money, also debt financing, really to help these companies so that you have a better equity story and a better sort of financing landscape in general.
And just maybe as another VC, VCs do not invest in CapEx.
Thank you.
Well, no, I agree, and I think that that's created a little bit of a conundrum in the industry today that we're seeing, come to fruition. And my question to you is, what do you believe governments are doing right, and where do you think governments need to take more of a lead, especially in terms of addressing this infrastructure problem? Because I think it's in fermentation, it's also going to be in cultivated meat and all different cultivated products. So, what do you think the role of government should actually be, and where do you see successes or, the lack thereof in the industry?
Well, if you look back in the U.S., as we were developing kind of the first wave of the bioeconomy was biofuels, right? And so there was a lot of government loans that were put out for construction of fermentation facilities to support that industry. So one role of government is to provide some kind, well, let me back up. For me, what government does is reduce risk to incentivize the private sector to invest. And so part of this was loan guarantees, those kinds of things that allowed the investors to put money into these capital-intensive projects. So one role is low-interest loans, loan guarantees, those kinds of things.
You referenced before the U.S.'s initiative for a bio-based economy. Do you feel like that initiative is going far enough, or do you feel like there's still a lot of room to be, bridged in that? Yeah.
Well, so far it's just getting started, right? So it was only the beginning of this year when the executive order came out to talking about building the bioeconomy using biotech and biomanufacturing. We just had, attending that were 9 government agencies. So give you a sense, it went from agriculture to defense and the security agencies. So broad look at the impact of the bioeconomy on various aspects of the U.S. economy. Coming out of that was recently a set of bold goals for the bioeconomy. And there were 5 agencies that laid out 5 and 20-year goals. Then there was the Inflation Reduction Act that put billions of dollars behind this. So there's a lot of money and a lot of planning. So I think, and then let me give you one other example, and I'm going to come back to this a little later as a point I want to leave you all with. I think it's not just government. I think we as an industry have to figure out new ways of working. And part of that, just to give you an example, the USDA put out a series of grants that linked everything from farmers to consumer packaged goods companies and all the steps in between to get them to work together to think about how they could bring innovation to market more quickly and address the opportunities of the bioeconomy, but also climate-smart agriculture, which is related to it. So I think, and the point I'll leave at the end is kind of new ways of working as an industry.
Yeah, I would add also from a European perspective, as a regional development agency, we really team up with the industry, so always doing co-investments together with the industry, just to be the push that things are happening. That's the main goal of our of the agency, of the region, to help the initiatives going to go.
And Jurgen, how else do you think that governments and startups can actually collaborate to help, address the major issues for scaling food tech?
Yeah, that can be in various ways. We can collaborate with startups. Oost was, for example, a founder of one of the co-founders of Start Life initiative in the Wageningen Food Valley area to promote, like, really assist the different startups. And also, yeah, there's especially a big need of money. So also looking at, okay, how can we promote these initiatives? So we really try to, at various angles, help the startups to get going. We are, for example, we saw there's a lack of really upscaling facilities for startups in the area. So we're conducting now hopefully quite soon there will be the answers there, a research, okay, what are exactly the capability needed for commercial phase. And based on the endings of the research, we really want to invest in these facilities and to make them accessible for startups.
Okay, so I think we've talked a lot about infrastructure and the need for government to be able to help fund or give incentivizations for startups, for private companies to actually make the leap and try and go into building these different future of food technologies. I think another issue that I see is around education, marketing, promotion of different types of future of food, whether it's the foods, ingredients, or technology platforms themselves. So what do you think the role should be of government in actually educating the public on these types of new solutions, right? And do you think that they should also be playing any role in promotion or in marketing itself? This is open to anybody.
Well, I think if we're really serious about establishing a new food system, obviously the government has to play a part in promoting it. I'm actually going more towards the regulatory part, which we'll probably discuss a little bit later. I think promotion is one thing, and saying, hey, look, there's a really cool protein, whether that's mycelium, or really telling the public, guys, we need to start veering away from meat production. We need to go towards more alternative solutions. But essentially, it's not just that promotion, but the greatest way the government could probably promote it is to just let that regulatory hurdle of getting those products into market easier, or at least having a little more clarity. Because what it feels like a little bit, I know you guys in the US with self-affirmed grass, you do actually a pretty good job, because one of my portfolio companies, for instance, well, most of them, guess what? They go to the US. Because they say, well, self-affirmed grass, okay, excuse my French, but if we screw it up and if we kill somebody, the fault's on the startup. But otherwise, let's go. And I think that's kind of the pioneering mentality. I don't want to bash the European ecosystem here, but that's kind of the pioneering mentality that you guys over there have. Whereas we're stuck with EFSA and this 2-year approval, and that after, so 1.5 years, you get all the dossiers going, all the experimental stuff done. I see a couple of smiles in the audience. And then you have that 9 months of all the member states having to ratify the safety thing, and then finally you're in the market. So sorry to torpedo the question, but for me it's really, it's not just saying, hey, this is good, but really having a pathway for companies to actually enter the market in a reasonable span of time.
No, I can absolutely resonate with that as a fermentation company producing mycelium-based products. So we are, just to give my opinion here, we're also encountering that issue in Europe. We're a German-American startup. We would love to come to market in Germany. But of course, we are going to the US because that's the quickest way we can start to sell our products. That being said, where do you all see maybe successful, good examples of governments giving those regulatory pathways? I can name a few, but maybe what are your thoughts there?
Speaking of, we complain in the U.S. too about the regulatory system. In fact, I would sometimes think that our policymakers are behind the curve, right? So as products come into the market, we're not ready to regulate them, right? And I'll use, here at this meeting, we were talking about carbon sequestration in soil. Well, what happened almost immediately, that industry got damaged because there were some cowboys out there that did not have good benchmarks and good validation. Well, that's a role of government to not just oversight, but to enable development by putting in place guidelines that then can guide the industry so it's credible. It's just like the stock market. So you have some credibility to it. So I think those are some really important things that we in the U.S. have not done, right? We've not gotten ahead of the curve. And so we tend to get it out over our skis, if you will, and then end up having to pull back and start over again. But certainly the entrepreneurial spirit is alive and well. And if there's anything we do, it's maybe overhype. And you saw some of the things in the food industry where, impossible or not impossible, but Beyond Meat has like a $5 billion market cap. Well, that's crazy, right, for a food company. So we tend to maybe lots of positives, but we also tend to overextend ourselves. But I think coming back to the point here, the role of government to me is to both provide oversight, but enablement that provides an environment to attract investors like us for our companies to be able to thrive.
Absolutely. And I want to circle back a little bit to the educational part again, because what this brings to mind for me are a few things. One is, when you grow up in the United States, you have this almost like food triangle of what you're supposed to eat, actually. And that is coming from the FDA. It's coming from the USDA. They're the recommendations on what an American, should typically be eating. And it's often meat, dairy, eggs, and then a little bit of vegetables at the top.
And that chart is driven by the commodity industry. Right?
Precisely. Yeah, it's driven by lobbyists. It's driven by the major meat and animal production industry itself. So, what are your thoughts there? Like, how should government maybe look at the future of food? What do you think is going to come down the line in the next couple of years or in the next decades, right? As you have maybe mycelium-based foods, or you have cultivated meats, eggs, dairy. How do you see the future in how government is actually portraying these types of products, right? Or what do you think they should be doing?
So I think, since we live in, let's be honest here, everybody likes money. We live in a capitalistic society. And you just said it yourself, the lobbyists from the meat industry and the cheese industry. And to be fair, guys, they have jobs and they have to make profits in this entire industry where people are working hard. I get their point. They're like, well, no way. We're not going to let that other stuff in because people are going to lose jobs. I'm going to lose my profits, and there's an entire industry that's going to fail. Fair enough. So I think the government should also have financial incentives or tax breaks or whatever it is to incentivize these parties as well to accept maybe alternative proteins or develop something in-house or acquire through M&A. I don't know what it is, but I think it's fair enough if people want to defend sort of the traditional industry and that's all they know. And if there's absolutely no financial incentive to switch because they're getting profits and people are keeping on eating meat, then yeah, of course, it's going to continue because there's a very, very few amount of people who would actually do something out of philanthropic, I'm going to do good for the environment reason. So it's got to be cold, hard cash incentives or tax breaks or whatever it is. And that's probably the best the government can actually do to at least change a little bit the landscape and therefore the lobbyists as well.
Yeah, when I'm doing a lot as I mentioned, a lot of activity in Washington, and my adage is the economics of the bioeconomy have to work. and we heard here at this meeting the talk about farmers moving to more regenerative practices. Well, they're not going to do that for philanthropic reasons. They're going to do it. They have 40 shots on goal in their lifetime to keep the farm active to support their family and their kids going to college. And so they don't take risk. And so if we're going to get them to move to things they want to do but can't afford to do, then we're going to have incentives for them. They're going to have to be able to capture ecosystem credits or something to help them make that transition, or low interest loans to buy that $500,000 planter that is a no-till planter. And so we have to provide those kinds of incentives so they can move to an area that both they want and we want them to do.
So, I absolutely agree, and I see this problem as honestly on par, if not even more critical than actually scaling the infrastructure. Because if you scale the infrastructure and you don't have governments that are willing to support these initiatives, really, or you don't have a mass public that is adopting these because they haven't been educated, but more so you have lobbyists that really have control over, what are the guidelines for these foods that are being, taught by the governments to the public. We're going to go against major headwinds in adoption, but mostly I think, you don't want to be battling the biggest lobbyists in the United States or worldwide. You want to be working with them. And so from what you're saying, do you really think that it's going to be the old industries, really, like the meat producers, the dairy producers, what have you, that are having to adopt these technologies and work hand in hand with, for example, the startups or the private companies that are driving these new technologies? Or do you see another way? Yeah. Go for it, Jurgen.
I think it should be a hand-in-hand development. We see quite a lot of also traditional meat industry adapting to being partly plant-based. Of course, there should be several solutions. Also, I think the more financial incentive to really change the whole industry. One example is maybe that we had a few slaughterhouses in our area being abandoned, and that they were all transferred into plant-based production sites. So it's really that they are transferred in these different ways. And then as a government, we also try to stimulate, of course, the collaborations between like the bigger industry and also the plant-based industry. To be honest, I think looking at the Netherlands, like the plant-based industry has adapted quite a lot there, and I think that's also partly thanks to the meat industry as well.
Can I name a good example of traditional meat industry?
Yes.
Because there's a brand called Rügenwerder Mühle, if one of you guys are in German speaking. They're a meat producer, actually, traditionally. So it's the one with the red windmill, basically. It's a meat-producing company. And they did a clever thing of going plant-based. And now they have a completely plant-based line where they position that product next to their meat products. And don't quote me on this, but I think they make more returns, actually, revenue on the plant-based now than the meat one. So definitely, I think that kind of shows that traditional industry can find opportunities in an emerging market.
Well, could I just maybe take a little different tact to our discussion? So we've been talking about what government can do. I'm more concerned about what industry can do, as a matter of fact. And just to give you an example, in the biotech industry, it takes about 20 years to go from discovery to market, and even to get significant market penetration takes longer than that. Well, if you just think about the opportunity that we just described in the US about support for the bioeconomy, those politicians don't have 20 years to wait for us to perform. And so we have to think about how can we reduce that time from innovation to market penetration. And that's new ways of working. We have a lot of innovation in the discovery part. I'll use microbes as an example. We can reduce the time to produce a strain and optimize it, get a commercially competitive titer. But then after that, it still takes another 10 years plus to go through the development and the market phase. We as an industry have to think about new ways of working together to shorten that time, and that's probably collaborating earlier in the innovation process so that the marketing people are there together with the development people, together with the innovators, so that we're thinking about that whole entire value chain. Because if we don't do that, we're going to fail. And so it's really an important time now for us, not just to have government support, but we as an industry to think about new ways of working together.
Agreed. Okay, I want to go a little bit back towards the marketing aspect, because this might not be an issue of infrastructure scaling or regulatory, but I think it's actually incredibly important, the types of headwinds that the industry, whether it's plant-based or what have you, have been facing when it comes to how the government is regulating these products and how they're actually, what are they called, right? Can you call it milk? Can you call it plant-based meat in and of itself? So What do you think the role of government should actually be? And what do you see as the successes? What do you believe these products should actually be named? Because again, this has to go then to market adoption, consumer understanding, even consumer confusion about what these products are sometimes on the shelves.
Well, I would say most food labels are pretty confusing. and part of that's because of the politics of what we've just been talking about, right? And so if one reads a label, you know, I don't have to go through the details, but all of you know that food labels are pretty poor and not very clear in what's actually in them and what they represent. So I think getting clarity on labeling is going to be really key to the adoption of these new products.
Jurgen, anything there?
Yeah, maybe an example like the vegetarian butcher, like there were really big, like even court cases, like, okay, can they use this name vegetarian butcher? I think it was actually like a good way to get attention to the plant-based field and to really, I found it a non-discussion, but I found it a good way to get attention to like the alternative protein field.
I agree. So out of everything we've talked about, I think we've really summed up what I see as some of the most urgent challenges really that we're facing to scale, whether it's from infrastructure to regulatory, education, marketing the products themselves, to what might be even one of the biggest challenges, which is getting lobbyists on board and getting big industry, traditional animal agriculture to actually potentially go hand in hand to help bring these technologies to market. So out of everything we've discussed, what do you think is the most urgent, the most critical thing to work on in terms of scaling? Let's start there. Open to anybody.
I'd go back to my side comment. I think for me, it's we as an industry have to think about new ways of working to get our products to market quicker. Government has invested in basic research that'll give us all the genomics tools that we need to select plants, select microbes, modify those plants, modify the microbes, but it still takes us 20 years. So if we think about, there was a talk yesterday about, 10 billion people and, 30 years from now. Well, if it takes us 20 years to get to these new products today to market, we're going to fail. And so we have to figure out how to get things to market quicker. And for me, that lies in the hands of the industry to figure out how to work together.
All right, sorry to go on a little bit of a tangent, but I have a question for you, Roger, or for anybody in response to this. But when you say that we have to have different ways of working and we have to speed up getting these technologies to market, I think I see one of the key challenges, which even we face as a fermentation company, is the enormous amount of time that it takes to do the R&D to get products that are ready for market, then to scale that production, et cetera. But so that's very much a technological problem in a way as well. There's the marketing side, there's consumer adoption, there's commercialization, but there's everything that comes before, which, as you're mentioning, that can be like a 5 to 10 year road, right? So what are all of your thoughts on how can we actually speed that up? I have my thoughts, but I'll come in after.
I think so. I think we had infrastructure, we had funding, we had regulatory, and I think just to your question, what can speed things up? I think it's really funding, because not all problems are solved by money, but a lot of problems can be solved by money, which buys you resources, which buys you more FTEs, which buys you more equipment, which buys you time. And I think really that aspect of non-dilutive grant funding for companies that have especially high capex R&D needs that don't necessarily materialize the commercial traction is probably one of the key aspects. I'm not saying that there isn't a lot out there. I'm just saying that the amounts are usually small and it's not enough, especially if you're looking at these type of companies.
Yeah, to add, I think it's more a government working together with the industry. So as a regional development agency, you always co-invest with the private industry. For example, recently, the Dutch company called Wyse. So we invested together with COSUM, so with the industry, to get to the next step. So really like promoting the initiatives, also providing capital. It could be via fund or it could be direct investments. That can be a part that the industry can work together with governmental related organizations.
Can I butt in on that? Because that's a really good point. So Revive is actually a company that we also looked at and passed because the timeline to revenue generation didn't fit our fund cycle. So most traditional VCs have 5-year investment, 5-year divestment, and their revenue generation was, much, much further out. It's not that they didn't have a hockey stick coming, but that's precisely the point where we saw, well, it's an incredibly innovative company. Brewers spent yeast for alt protein for methylcellulose substitute. I love the management, but we just said, you guys are not far enough that the risk opportunity ratio fits, plus the timelines in which I have to present a return to my investors. And that's a really, really good point. Sorry for torpedoing this.
No.
That's exactly the problem.
And I think, as a semi-government, our scope is longer. So we don't have like 5 years. It can be a little bit longer. Of course, we look at, what's the right time to exit? Of course, we would like to have a very good exit because we can reinvest that money in new kinds of new startups. But we really have more a longer-term commit. We don't have like the private venture capitals. We really have more the stricter guidelines.
And I think Marie, what you're saying though, it's incredibly relevant and it's incredibly, I think, poignant for this moment today, where I sense that there's a reckoning within the industry because you've had a ton of VC money poured into companies that are more biotech than food companies, right? Which is what we need. It's what the world needs. But the revenue cycles and also just the trajectory of those companies to be able to reach the type of returns that VC investors are expecting, it just doesn't fit in the typical timeline that your requirements are. However, VC has still been investing in these companies over the last 5 to 10 years, thankfully, I think, because we do need these technologies, we do need these products, but now, there's a shakeup in the industry, there's a shakeup in the market, and I think those options are very few and far between for companies today, right? So I really appreciate the conversation that we're having today, and I think for those in the audience that are startups, it's incredibly important to think about this because the type of VC funding schemes that have been around for the last 5 to 10 years, that's changed, right? You need to be showing commercial traction to get a VC to be investing in you today, and that's great. That's what businesses should be pushing for, but it may not be the types of companies that will build what some think are the future of food. So again, it's going to come to government and private collaboration. It's going to come to grants, loans, subsidies, and I think I really agree with all of your points. But in particular, when it comes to funding, the way that we speed up, the way that we get market adoption, the way that we market these products, it has to come from money, and that money can't all come from VC. So we need to start to rethink, how do we finance the scaling of this industry? And on that point, I will say thank you all. Thanks so much for your talk today. I think you all brought such really insightful comments. I really appreciate it. And thanks for listening.
And thank you, Isabella. Thank you, Jurgen. Thank you, Marie. And Roger. Great discussion. Thank you.